And so I'd like to invite to the stage Sue Tobler, Anastasia Hofmann, Naomi MacKenzie, and Beat Kerr. Could you all come on up, please? Come on. Now, you already have the food from Sue. Come on up, come on. Here we go. You guys get in the middle. Nope, you get in the middle. Sue, wherever you want to go, Bear, you're over here. There you go. So we have a food chain here. So it was so the first thought was, here are 4 individuals who have all looked at something and said, it's not good enough. Each one of them. And this is what an entrepreneur does. They look at a system, they look at something, they say, it's not good enough, and I think I or we can do better. And this is what I really loved, how Michael, with your diagram, thinking about that, where in how we make change happen. I wanted to ask you, each one of you, is essentially, what was it that brought you to making that commitment to making change happen? I'm going to start with you, with Sue. I'm going to start with you, because you're at the beginning of this chain. You graduated from the ETH, you're a scientist, and now we're having your beautiful food.
Is this working?
Yeah.
When people ask what I'm doing, I'm never sure what to answer at what my profession is now. I'm officially an astrophysicist, but now anything between event organizer, head chef, and content creator.
You need to hold the mic closer. There you go.
Closer?
Yeah.
What made me think I want to change? I think I always look at things, and I don't know if you know Calvin and Hobbes, these comics, and there's a very famous one where I think the mother says to Calvin, it could be much worse, and Calvin says, it could be much better too.
Fair.
And I think that's very much just how I think, but with everything in life, when you push the boundaries, often you push into other people when you do that. But that never stopped me. I can't really say what was the beginning.
But you chose food.
I always loved food since the beginning of my life. I think my mom is a fantastic chef, and she's not a professional chef, but a cook.
Yeah.
And that's just always fascinated me. And my dad studied electrical engineering at ETH, and so these two things kind of came together. And then I love science, sustainability, and food, and making things happen, doing things, organizing things, seeing results.
But one of the things you started, this is what I was always so fascinated about, you were actually looking at not just what the food is, but the impact of the ingredients of what was being put together, almost like, in a way, the science of the food as well.
Yes, for us it was very much a revolution. In the beginning was the food, and then the first element that came to it very naturally was the science, but in the beginning much more from an angle of what happens when you cook, what happens if you fry an egg, what happens if you pressure cook something. So I'm a physicist, so that's how I think. I want to know what's happening in my pan and my pot, and I think it makes you more creative and it makes you a better chef if you understand what's happening. And over time, the sustainability aspect came to it, and also here we found it very important that these days there's so much information and truth and half-truth to go to the ground and actually present facts which are true. It's super complex, it's multidimensional, it's very hard to make a statement that holds up, but to distill this down and then present it.
I'm not sure how many else, I've never really thought about what happens to the egg when I fry it. I mean, this is what I mean. This is what's so fascinating for you, and for me, with you, is how you really thinking about that. What happens to this? And then we have our next two from Kitra, and you both were studying at the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, right? And you were, during your studies, you saw some stuff and you're like, what the heck? Tell us about the Entstehungsgeschichte. Where did your idea come across, the change you wanted to make?
It happened unintentionally. So we didn't really choose to start Kaitro. Kaitro chose us in a way. We worked a lot in kitchens, we worked in service, and we threw away enormous amounts of food during these work experiences and started to question why this could happen on a daily basis and why no one had actually tackled this issue. And so it's because I think we were so close to the problem that we decided to do something about it. We didn't really set out saying, okay, of all the problems, we're going to focus on food. We were surrounded by food. We both love food, cooking, everything. So it made sense to take that approach. We also saw the unequal distribution of food. We worked in the US where we were working for this amazing hotel that had these huge events with caviar and whatever luxury food you can imagine. And we would produce this gorgeous food. And at the end of the event, there was all this food left over. And we said, okay, we're riding our bikes past the park. Can we bring all the food with us and we'll go give it out to the homeless people in the park? I'm like, no, you can't do that. Okay, but what are we going to do with it? We're going to throw it in the bin. And so this, in combination with looking at what resources are needed to actually produce the food and bring it to a place where it can be thrown away, kind of drove us to tackle food waste.
And tell everybody, because everybody probably doesn't know exactly what it is that your startup was. What does your startup actually do?
So with Kitro, we use technology to measure food waste, so to quantify it. And we're using, it's a hardware, it's a scale. You put your bin on top and we're focusing on the gastronomy industry, so really canteens, hotels, restaurant chains. And they put their bin on top, it takes images, there's a camera as well, it takes images, and we're training algorithms to identify exactly what has been thrown away. And so the users at the end, they have a dashboard where they see the data, how much was wasted, what time, they start seeing patterns, the cost, and based on that, they can optimize their work processes and reduce food waste and also save costs at the end. So it's
really fascinating. It's almost like you're using what I would consider like facial recognition techniques for food waste recognition techniques, right? I mean, that's really pretty kind of cool. Now, and then Beat, you take some of this waste and turn it into bioplastic. So why?
Because it makes sense. I mean, it's very obvious that for almost any product, it makes more sense to use side streams or waste streams unless they're used or avoided through your technology, which I think is great, obviously. We use these as a feedstock and turn waste into value, which is recycling per definition. It's carbon negative, and it's very healthy.
But what did you see? At what point did you say, I'm going to make bioplastics? I don't think you started off when you were 16 years old saying, I'm going to make bioplastic from garbage.
Well, honestly, in my previous life, I was an industrial designer and I like to play around and build things. So we were thinking about how to build a company that turns waste into value and brings that on an industrial scale. So it didn't come to me, but somehow it was also very playful, let's say.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
That's great. So collectively, for me, again, you represent the only person we're missing who we unfortunately weren't able to get was the farm. In the sense of, and so we'd have there just wasn't enough room on the stage. I was just carrying out of that. So, but thinking of this is one of the systems which we heard Hans talk about this morning. We've been thinking about this radical systemic transformation. So, from your viewpoints, from outside where do you feel are some of the levers that your observations are that this radical transformation could take place or could begin to take place? Or what are your observations so far? Anything you could share with us that might end up on here? Any ideas? Sue?
From my point of view, the first thing is to get people to think about things and realize there's something which could be done better, or the way it's been done in the past might not be the best way to do it in the future. And I think with Taste Lab, that's exactly what we do. We need to eat every single day, multiple times. It's a very joyful and often highly emotional thing to eat and to cook. It's what our parents cooked, or grandparents cooked. And it's a very good vehicle to bring a story. So here we chose these themes for the snack bar, for the lunch later. And with the food you eat, you can bring people to think and say, well, here is this and is this theme. And this to me is the first step to sensibilize people and say, here's something to think about. And then I think it's in combination with everything else we see and experience throughout the day and in our lives that it accumulates. I have talked to Moritz Jäger. He's doing kind of how, so we think about change and what to happen. I think very often we know what we have to do, but then how do we get the people to do it? And I remember talking to you, said very often people think he's working with big companies and they make a change and then people don't immediately adapt to it. And then people think, oh, it didn't work or it wasn't successful. And he said very often in life when people make bigger changes in their lives, they move, they have a different relationship or have kids, that then things they experienced in the past, it accumulates and then they change things. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to see, we plant little seeds all the time. And at some point it will grow.
Hear about that. Yep, go ahead.
I totally agree, and I think we have heard and learned a lot about change with regards to social behavior, interaction, etc., etc. On the other hand, I really believe also we need prototypes and examples, and somebody needs to get the shit done. And as we have technologies that we can implement, yet they're on the market, they're working, I think it's important to show to the rest of the world that it's not only a theoretical topic, it's also implemented.
Mm-hmm. Good.
I think a big part of igniting the change that we need everyone to kind of feel, and the sense of, we talked about responsibility, how the responsibility can be shared and who has the responsibility. I think it is, we as individuals do have a lot of responsibility when it comes to how the food system is currently set up. Mm-hmm. And I think a big reason for that is the data gap that we have. We have a lack of information of what resources are being used, where they're being wasted, how we can consume in the most responsible way. And I think bringing data to this area will be able to really show people why they should make this change and what is important and what changes are going to make the biggest impact. To just say, okay, we should change it because it's bad, is hard to actually ignite people. But when you can say, okay, every time you throw away a burger, you're wasting a 90-minute shower. That's crazy. And to put it into perspective of quantifying what is the actual impact and showing why you should care and why you should change, I think that's how we can actually move people in the right direction.
And maybe to add on to this, I think also regulations is an interesting, I mean, it's always complex and complicated to put up regulations in a world where we have already quite a lot of regulations, right? But in order to achieve certain goals, especially also with big corporates, at some point there needs to be a rule about, now in our case, food waste monitoring regulations or reduction mandates and so on, because otherwise, yeah, the change is too slow in a way.
So have you seen a change in the food waste since you've been focused on this in the past, what, how long have you been doing this? 3-4 years?
4 years.
4 years. So in your engagement with this, have you seen any change already happening now, or is it still just abysmal?
Yeah, I mean, when we started, we had to really go to the properties and we had to explain to them why they should be measuring food waste. We got a lot of backlash, like, no, we don't have food waste here. And then you say, okay, sure, open the trash bin, and you're like, yeah, you have food waste. Stop pretending.
Really?
But now, especially during COVID, when everything was locked down and people had to, especially the hospitality industry, had to rethink how they operate, they had to digitalize. And with this, sustainability became a much bigger topic. And now when we go out and talk to people, it's much less about why should they measure food waste, but how are they going to do it in the most optimal way for their staff and for their kind of bottom line.
And Bert, have you seen a change in the acceptance of bioplastic or demand, or how's that moving for you?
Yeah, absolutely. But to be frank, it's not an acceptance because the companies want to do good. The big corporates, it's an acceptance because they have to do it. I mean, single-use plastics are prohibited. Packaging needs to be 25 or 50% recycled by 2025, etc., etc., etc. And I mean, I'm actually more liberal mindseted, but with regards to that, I really like laws.
So,
no, I mean, there is no other way to change it unless end consumers, startups, and I think also big corporates, they really need to be pushed.
Yeah, interesting, this sort of dichotomy. You don't really like laws, but hey, okay. So, Community, do you have some questions or comments that you'd like to ask or add to here? Brian and then Greg. I can't remember your name, but thank you. So we'll start with Brian, right?
I just need a yes or no from Bat. Can you make shrink wrap for my games? And we can talk about it afterwards. Can you make shrink wrap for my games?
Not yet.
Okay, well,
but
we'll talk later.
work on that.
Fair, all right. Greg.
Yeah, hello.
Go ahead and stand up, Greg. Thank you, man.
No, I thought it was very interesting to hear, I think for the first time, I think it's another powerful form of storytelling is the use of visualization of data and sort of the impact of just seeing information visual, like the idea of invisible things becoming visual. And I think I'm curious about your experiences sort of hitting a common denominator when people get into a feedback loop. Have you seen then a change in behavior? And I think in a broader sense, how have we measure ourselves even? Like what kind of visual indicators can we capture that on a daily basis you can see sort of a visual indication of change? So in other words, are there visual metaphors or ways of sort of visually interacting with change that allow us to kind of understand impact at scale? So I sort of appreciate the idea that you're sort of using computer vision and dashboarding, and I'm kind of curious what the experience has been.
I mean, it was with Kiteshow, we don't leave them alone with the data. We actually help them to implement best practices as well to a certain degree because it is otherwise very overwhelming. What we noticed is that with the visualization, actually what we didn't have at the beginning on the dashboard was photos of the food waste. And then very quickly talking to our customers, they were like, hey, but can we see photos? Because that really triggered even more change, and it helped them to also show it to their staff, to the bosses, GM, whatever. So we saw that this visual, like what you just mentioned, this visualization of data to just show them a bin full of chicken nuggets, that really shocked people, and that triggered the change even more so. But already measuring it, so we always say what gets measured gets done. And in our case, we noticed this as well, that once you put a device there, there's automatically a focus on food waste, the quantities, and there is already a positive change usually when the kitchen is also obviously interested in being part of that change.
Go ahead.
I think a big learning for us was that there's so much data, and we can't even use all the data that we collect because there's just so much of it. And we were also just giving this data to the customers at the beginning. We were saying, here's everything that's in your trash bin. And it was too much. It's like the climate problem. It's too much to focus on everything at once. So you have to break it down into bite sizes for everyone. So what we do is we look at the top 5 ingredients that we're going to focus on. And we set action points for the top 5, and we track the performance. How has it reduced? And then we focus on the next 5 and the next 5. But I think that was a big learning for us, is that you can't, even though you want to solve the problem immediately, you have to take it bit by bit if you really want to have a long-term sustainable reduction.
So you have to have patience.
No.
Right? Is that what you're saying? You have to have patience? I see you, Ben, just a second. So you're saying you have to have patience with your clients.
No.
But we only have 8 years. So how do we mix patience and urgency? This is an interesting challenge here. Ben.
Thank you very much. I'm from Africa, and this is a topic that's very close to my heart. And the first 3 words I remember when we were under that tent the first night under the rain was Reto saying about air, water, and food. Now, I have already put these 2 ideas up on the board, and we have a panel of 4 about waste and organic. First observation, why is the food that we're eating served to us not as a buffet? Why are we all wasting? And I've seen everyone waste. It's something I've been looking for. Second, we are using single-use plastic PET bottles. So one idea up there is next year, let's get SIG in, and let's get them to sponsor a bottle so every one of you has one.
Yeah.
And that then follows on from what Michael says, that it starts us changing mindset, and we're all here. So let's do it.
Noted. What happened next year? Good, over here. Wait, Willie? Who else does?
Thank you, Ben,
Christian,
for
sorry,
pointing
mate.
that out. I thought it was very interesting yesterday, as I'm a zero waster, and I brought my own bottle, of course, and I'm not drinking tea because it's wrapped in plastic and stuff. And what I saw yesterday was actually very funny, because when it comes to trash, it's always out of sight, out of mind kind of mindset. I've lived in Africa as well and saw different kind of approaches, where you just don't have any recycling in place. But, for us as leaders, or actually role models, it was very interesting to see that people just left the plastic wrapping of their tea bags on the table. I was like, what the fuck? Seriously, I was the one collecting it and putting it into the trash bin. Also asking whether there was a recycling bin for biodegradables in terms of bananas and everything like that. So I think if we can't really be role models if we're not doing the shit, seriously. I think we should all do better. And, yeah.
So let's say next year we're going to implement the food the trash control system, and we collect the waste and make a giveaway for second year afterwards.
I have to say, though, that's pretty phenomenal what's happening when we go and eat lunch and eat dinner every time. I don't know if you guys have been looking at how much waste is left over, but it is minimal. So we can talk about the plastic things, and yes, there's definitely room to improve, but I think that is a massive thing that usually when we go to conferences, they talk about sustainability and food, and then you go to these buffets, and afterwards they throw everything away. You go to these buffets and they have pineapple and shrimp and all these products that aren't supposed to be there after you've talked for an hour about how to change the food system. So I think, I agree there's still room for improvement, but I think definitely an applause for the food and the way that it's been presented and prepared and served and portioned.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Oh, totally agree. So we've got Willie, then Christian, and then Eva.
I'm very happy that we see now a panel of entrepreneurs, and I congratulate each one of you. And actually, I came to this conference also for you to have an offer, and for all the entrepreneurs here in the room, because we have a huge opportunity to have one for free, a huge castle or a former castle, which is close to here. It's called Löwenberg. And there we can offer to all the startups a free co-working and co-living up to break even. Because I've been an entrepreneur myself, I know the little money that you have, that it should last as possible, to have enough time to find clients who pay for your services. So whenever you feel, please apply to me, and we need have a look in your business plan, and then we can give you a Löwenberg ticket, which allows you to have this free co-working and co-living until break-even. To every one of you, please welcome to apply.
Thank you, Willie. That's really fantastic. So there's the offer on the table for if any of these ideas that we're going to think about over the next 24 hours needs a home up in the beautiful mountains, then there's a home to be had. That's really amazing. Thank you. Christian.
Yes, thank you. So I've myself been working for the last 10 years in the food sector, and kind of I'm an economist gone bad, or actually gone into the good sector, and actually experienced myself the difficulties of bringing new ideas, bringing new concepts to the food market. And one of the key elements that I believe that we need to do in food especially is about looking at systems, looking at it holistically, so where it comes from and what kind of side streams come out of it. And I think these are just really, really key elements that we need to take into consideration. So not come up with single solutions, but really come up with systems that create solutions, especially also in the food sector.
So I'm hoping we're going to see there's a cluster over there on food. So I'm hoping that we'll have more than more than 3 ideas up there, okay? So, and also take a look at, one more thing about the marketplace. It's really important for you, all of us, to be taking a look at what's up there, but also think, how could you help, or how could you help some of these other ideas, start to walk, right? Because all of us have many talents in this room, and as individuals, what we're passionate about. So please take a look at those before, on our way to lunch. Just take a little bit of a time to take a look at that. So I think Eva.
Thanks.
So a few of the comments that were made before about what's going on at the conference itself made me feel compelled to also say something exactly about systems and systemic trade-offs. Your suggestion, I don't know your name, but Ben, all right, to, for example, have everyone get a plastic water bottle. On the face of it, it sounds like a good one because then everyone has a plastic water bottle, but I've been to a bunch of conferences and I've gotten a ton of them. And probably almost everyone here has a bunch, right? And the actual, well, I guess the point is that the impact of this has been studied, the impact of one of these plastic bottles that's reusable, you need to use it 500 or so times in order to compensate for a PET plastic bottle. So you need to, so these types of trade-offs. But likewise with the food system itself, you know, bioplastic, I think we should be moving toward an economy where we have renewable materials as the basis. But right now, if we took all the volume of plastic that we are producing and switched it into biomaterial, we would actually put a huge amount of pressure on land systems because we just don't have enough. We're already using way more agricultural land than we can. And in most cases, the food waste is going, that's being produced is already being valorized in various ways. So I'm not saying that, I'm sure you have a good answer to that, Beat. So I'm not, but in any case, what I'm saying is that we need to be continuously aware of the trade-offs that are implicated. And just as a last note before...
Is there a question or is there just all comments?
No, the question that I actually wanted to ask, I do think the comment is important, but the one question that I originally wanted to ask before being triggered by this was about scaling and what types of issues you are facing in actually getting to scale with these solutions, because that's the thing. There's a lot of great things, but they're fringe, and I'm curious what your personal experiences on that are. And as one shout out, we are, with Metabolic, hosting an incubator for systemic solutions in the food system. It's called Fresh. It's starting in November, and applications are open now, so we're taking 30 entrepreneurs who have transformative ideas for transitioning the food system. If anyone's interested, it's on the board.
Perfect. Thank you, Ivo. Beat?
Also, I totally agree, but that's why we use waste and not cultivated plants as a base material. So that's the easy answer. And with regards to scale up, it's not really a problem to scale up. It's more a problem to convince the big companies to invest in a new production plant next to where the waste accumulates. So actually, we are going with technology to where the waste accumulates. That means next to the existing production plant, you would need to build a second one, which makes totally sense with regards to sustainability. But of course, there is money involved, and that is more what is slow.
Okay. Okay.
If we can,
you know it better now.
I think looking at scalability from our perspective, we struggle actually with resources because we're competing in the startup scene with companies that can have a positive ROI super quickly. And they expect kind of a 10x on their investment, and what we're doing takes longer. It takes more time. You need longer to see the results. You need to really change an entire mindset and process. And so for us to compete at the same level with other startups and get the resources that we need, whether it's money or even competing for talent, we're competing against Google for machine learning talents. It's insane to have that kind of resource scarcity also in the company.
Okay, last question, David. It's coming right up.
Thank you. I find this super inspiring. Especially, it's one of the few times I've seen that somebody presents a business model which does empty itself. Think about that. Means there's a moment you will not be needed anymore. Isn't that liberating? The shorter this is the case, the more liberating it feels. Just that was a comment. But the question is, have you thought about what you do when the bin is empty?
What you do with what?
Both Beat and the other colleagues. When the bin is empty, when there is no waste left. What
I'm excited for that day. We're waiting. But no, you're right. And it's something that also investors sometimes bring up. It's like, oh, but if you're so good at what you do, then obviously they don't need you after 3 months. And we're like, okay, this takes a lot longer than 3 months for an organization to change. What we also see is that more and more organizations, they need to report on certain KPIs, sustainable KPIs, and food waste is a very easy to quantify, at least with our solution, it's easy to quantify, and you can also derive the CO2 impact from it in one way or the other. So it becomes really a KPI they can also observe over a longer period of time, and they need actually for the impact reporting, some of them bigger companies that have now impact reporting going on. And so that's definitely a direction we're going, and also we're looking at integrations to make the system a bit more holistic. So moving away from not only food waste and quantifying food waste and helping with that efficiency, but really also including other aspects from a business by having integrations with other systems.
We will never reach zero waste, though. We're not going to put Beat out of business. We're not going to. I mean, the dream is that one day our solution is not needed, right? Because we've optimized in a way. We know the processes. We know how to handle resources in a way that nothing edible or unnecessary ends up in our trash bin. But I can tell you, we are very, very far away from that. So if we achieve that in our lifetime, it's a good
2040
best outcome.
I think
2040.
Totally agree.
It's a problem we hope we have, right?
No.
I can quickly maybe catch up on that. It's interesting to see what you said about all the things we should do or not do. I 100% fully agree with everything. It was interesting to come up here to say, well, there's an existing infrastructure with everything, and to say, okay, which things do we focus on? For now, we're nowhere near 100%, not a discussion. But to think, what are the big impacts, and we can do now. And to see that the movement is in the right direction. And I'm sure if we do this again, we've learned so much already. What can we do? How can we better adapt? But in this regard, again, it's interesting to see, because I'm on the other side in the kitchen as well. And to see there's the plan and the vision, and on the other side is reality. And hearing, oh, today there's 10 people more. Oh, 2 people have left. Oh, one person now has an allergy and haven't heard nothing about. So where do we meet? If I knew exactly what everybody likes to eat, how many grams, I could do it exactly, you eat it, there would be absolutely nothing. And we went as far as we could. We said we make one menu which caters for all the allergies and things people want to eat and not. But there's a gap in between that, and I think our goal is to shrink this gap to the absolute minimum, but I doubt that it will be zero. And I think it will be good enough if it's not exactly zero.
And with that, shrinking the gap between us and lunch. So before we take a moment to think about what we've heard in the last 2, so it's this block on change with Michael and you, what are we having for lunch today? So
today, lunch, very matching theme, is about how to reduce food waste and think about that. And the way we think about this, which is actually another project we did as Taste Lab a couple of years ago. So we thought about, again, from a very scientific point of view, how do you make food last? What are the chemical and physical principles behind making food last? And it was very interesting. I'm walking into the supermarket and look at everything and think, is this fresh? Does it expire quickly? Why does it last 2 months, a year? How has it been treated? Is it salty, sweet, candied? Is it heated, chilled? And so we derived principles on how to make things last. Today on the table you'll see those explained in a very nerdy way, whoever likes that.
Good.
And then we take products and think about, so one thing is to think from leaf to root, which is kind of the equivalent for vegetables from nose to tail. So think about the carrot green, think about peels, make a powder of something. And then to make things last and preserve things, so things you might not need today, pickle them and use them the next day. And today the menu is all about how to preserve food, and also there's a link. We also happen to be app programmers, because the last 1.5 years haven't exactly been good for events. But my business partner studied computer science at ETH, so why not program apps? And our app is it's gathering all these techniques on how to preserve food. So just a QR code if you're interested, and try things at home. It's much easier than you think.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's something to take.
That's wonderful. Home. Well, thank you, Sue. Thank you, Anastasia, Naomi, and Beat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.